welcome home. This is the Irish Roots Cafe, where every day's a holiday, and there's always room for one more. Come right this way, have a seat with me one more time today in that corner booth, celebrating episode number 135 of the Irish Family History Broadcast. Sweeney, clear up that floor. Katie, bar the door. Molly, put on another pot of Irish coffee and bring out the Irish dancers. It's time we get this show on the road. We've got another full house today, not a chair to spare. I'm OLaughlin, your host, and you can reach me on my webpage at irishroots.com, and be sure to check out the written show notes there on my blog. They might contain some additional information and some things for you to click on if you want to go right to some of these places I'm talking about. Now, you can also search all of our books and our videos on the homepage there, so take your time and look it over. And remember, you can phone 816-256-3360 and leave your comments on my recorder. Try it, you'll like it. Among today's topics, McKelvey is the family of the day. Number 2, the tragedy of Skibbereen, County Cork, records and famine pits. Number 3, New York's top 10 Irish places in pictures. Number 4, Irish convicts to New South Wales. Number 5, golf club wins the right to be men's only. Number 6, 40 days and 40 nights of what in Ireland? Number 7, families that fought alongside Brian Boru, High King. Hey, now it's time for notes this week. We've had a lot of information here the last few weeks on what's been going on here, so I might as well keep on sharing it with you until something comes up that stops me. Number 1, our head school is coming along quite nicely here. We now have 7 broadcast feeds as part of the school. The 7th one's coming up, actually. It's not quite in there yet. And we're also putting together in-person presentations for our head school, so we could actually come on and put a head school in operation for your group or organization anywhere in the country. Wouldn't that be fun? Now, our subjects include genealogy, Irish song, particularly in America, Irish language, and we have a lot of fun with that one, and Irish in America. We've done several, and we're willing to do some more little special episodes on the Irish anywhere in the States. Or I tell you, you could fly us up to Canada. We do that too, or Mexico. And the Irish video shorts, they're out there too. That's one of our podcast feeds. So I tell you, we're getting quite a bit out there to look at, and it pays to take a look at everything, and you'll understand your ancestors a little bit better. And think about that for your next group presentation. Or I wonder if our Irish language expert would give private tutoring lessons locally if somebody wanted Irish language lessons. Now, there's a thought. Or how about an Irish wedding singer? Peter not only sings and is an historian and is a co-host on the Head School, he's also a wedding singer, so there's another thought. You want to get the genuine article for a wedding, I'd be contacting Peter. And, hey, how about an Irish sing-along evening? There's several of us that can handle that. Just give us a call. We'll see if we can put something together. Number 2, the newest subject we're adding to the Head School broadcast and presentations, that's going to be the Irish language. And we're going to be talking very basic instructions and some beginning notes on Irish. And just as importantly, we're going to talk about some of the history of the language and some of the fun things thrown in, like favorite sayings and how to sing a verse of a song. And I think you'll like it. Just watch for those first episodes before the end of the year. You'll have some fun and some history with the Irish language like never before. That I'm telling you. Number 3, please do support all of these programs I've been talking about. We've put them all together just for you, and you can sponsor a podcast like a Hedgerow History Session for $100 and get what they call a pass or a letter of introduction from one of our instructors. And you can become a member, or you can add one of our books to your library. You know, I've either written or published all of those books on our webpage, so it does help us out directly. Now, number 4, we're also raising funds for 2 computers, and we need to continue that to keep all our podcast feeds going. So we're using GarageBand on the Macintosh for all of our editing, and we need to help finance our continued operation. So our session leaders will then be able to function more efficiently as well. And frankly, I need the help. So we've got to get a computer for my co-host Peter there too. I think he's on a dinosaur right now, and he really doesn't have room to record anything, and I'm all out of space on mine. And you know what? Come winter, he may not be able to make it to the old Irish cafe on the hill here. So all help is appreciated. Well, now it's time we're going to move on to Books and Podcast of the Month. Well, our audio excerpt is going to be from one of our upcoming podcasts from the Hedge School History Session podcast, and that's the one we did on the High King Brian Boru and the Battle of Clontarf. You know, we started off we were just going to do a podcast about the Battle of Clontarf and High King Brian Boru, the last High King, so to speak, perhaps, of Ireland. But by the time it was done, we had 2 episodes on the Vikings. We had 1 episode on the rise of Brian Boru and how that happened, and another episode on the Battle of Clontarf and King Brian Boru, and of course Gormlagh. And it sure is a lot of fun. But boy, you get together a couple of Irishmen and they start talking history, it expands exponentially, I think. But I also think you'll enjoy it. So now I'll just give you a little sample from that podcast. I'm going to give you where I was talking about some of the families who actually supported our last High King in that famous battle. Of course, the strange thing is they say he won the battle, but he ended up dead, and Sihtric, the Viking leader, ended up alive, and he stayed in Dublin. I don't quite understand that. How could that be? Well, I'll just take a listen now. We'll give you just a short little, maybe 60 seconds or so to explain that, and see if you hear any of your families mentioned in this list of the, well, you might call it Brian Boru's army list. Here you go. So that's about all I can think of today, except I wanted to just mention for all of my genealogy folks out there talking about the families, you take a quick look. You know, they said the Clan Owen or the Eugenians from County Kerry down there were growing in strength and supplied a lot of men for that battle. Well, if you take a look at the Annals of the Four Masters and Keating's History of Ireland, who were some of the people saying just the 2nd Division of Boru's people? And those are the ones from Munster. And you'll see Mahoney, or the ancestor of Mahoney, commanded. And the ancestors of the O'Donohues and Lyons and Moriartys and the Carrolls, the Keneallys, Collins and Donovans, and also the O'Connor Carey and the Dugans and Phelan and the Meagers and Maguire, McNamara, McClancy, the Brians, the O'Days, and of course the children of Kennedy, the Shanahan and Hogan and Lonergan, Kelleher, Maroney and Boland, and there's several more. But this really has been a part of the history, not just for the Irish at large, but particularly for those families that fought alongside Brian. So you got to remember, way back along the line somewhere, your family probably fought in this battle if you were from Munster or even parts of Connaught. And of course, Leinster felt the brunt of the whole thing severely too. That's all I can do on this, Peter, so I'd like to sign off and give it to you. Well, that's the end of our podcast excerpt for the month. That's from our Hedge School podcast from our history sessions. And Peter's on that one too. I just took a 60-second clip, and he came on right after that. So you'll get to hear him too if you tune in and get 2 opinions, 2 comments on things, which usually is much better than one. And in this case, I'm telling you, it certainly is. Peter is a very learned man. Now, let's see. I talked a little bit about that. Okay. Now you can go to our Hedge School history sessions either on our webpage. You can click in there. I think we've got 6 episodes out now. Or you can also go to iTunes, our page on iTunes, and you can subscribe there to any of our different Irish series. And hope you enjoy it. number 2, we've picked out a book for the month, The Scottish Macs, and that's because of our family name of the month. So that was a very early work in the modern style on names that originally began with Mac or Mick, and they were found in Scotland and Ireland. And I've got a link on the blog. And it's not only Mac and Mick, but it's Mac with a K, M-A-K. Some of the names were used like that. And, of course, we all know about the O names, but those O names aren't in Scotland, really. I think somebody said Kennedy might be, but that fell out of use. So I'm going to have to do a little seminar on those Mac and O names and how that all came about. But until then, here's our Scottish Mac book. It was one of the first works done. They really tried to open some new territory up on family names. And I think you'll find it interesting. I put, now if you go to our blog, I put all of the names just the first 50 or so names on our blog, and it'll have them all listed there so you know which names were included in that work. Names like McAdams and McAdam and McAddy and McGaffern and McAlpine and Macanaba and Macanbard and Macanclarich and Macandu and McAndy. There's no end to them, folks. I think we've got over 1,000 or something close to that in that. So take a look at the blog if you want to see if your name made that list. Now, just one more time to remind you, we've got a blog reader and a podcast. The blog reader is a computer that reads that blog, and you can click the little button on above the blog there on our webpage, and it'll read it to you, but it's not the same as coming from a human voice. That's the podcast, and that's what I'm reading right now is the podcast. And that just gives you one more way to take a look and enjoy things while you're here. Coming up, photos of the top 10 Irish places in New York, including some very historical places you've heard of. And, hey, that reminds me to say thank you to all of our members. Without you, these podcasts wouldn't be possible, and we've got a short podcast today. I had to cut some things out, but next week we'll be back with those Magnificent 7. Maybe we'll make it the Magnificent 14 just to make up for it. These days I'm running short on time. But thanks you once again to everybody who's ordered a book or who has subscribed to the podcast. We appreciate it. We need the help. And hey, if you want to, you could crate up a nice expensive computer and ship it here to the cafe, and we'd be using it the next day. That is, if we could figure out how to uncrate it and hook it up. That's something in itself. But now it's time we move on to the Irish family name of the day. Well, the Irish family name for today is MacElvie, and that's in honor of Anita McKelvey of Canada, who's looking for James McKelvey, born 1779. And you take a look at some related spellings of the name. It can be Mac or it can be Mick, or you can drop the Mac and Mick. And the Kelvey, gosh, those last letters can be VY or VIE. They've even changed it to MacElvie. I think that was in County Donegal, and McElboy and McGilvey. So there's all kinds of strange twists and turns on the history of that name. It takes some research to really get it down pat. It's part of Variant Spelling Group's number 1398, and that's taken from the Master Guide to the Various Spellings of Irish Family Names. A link to that on the blog. Now, if we take a quick little look at some snippets on the history of the name, you're going to find MacElvie as being a name traditionally centered in the north of Ireland. That's the old province of Ulster. And the family could be of Scots origin, but we think it's most often Irish, I believe. And it's most common in Donegal, Derry, and Tyrone in my records. Now, you look at spellings like MacElboy that are found in the census of 1659 in County Down, and the variant spelling of McAvoy that's used there as well. There's all kinds of different spellings, like we were saying, and that can account for why there's such a relatively low count of that family name. So even though McKelvey may just have a few references, if you start adding in all those different spellings, there might be more of the name than you thought. And hey, note, it's in today's book of the month, The Scottish Macs, which I think was by Johnston. It's in his book, so it's a name in Scotland, too. We just don't know. We're not too sure who crossed over when and what nationality they might be, but they're both origins in Ireland, so maybe a DNA test is in order. That might help. Now, we've took a look at the Irish Family Book of Arms, and MacElvie's not in there, so we don't have to worry about that today. And you know what's coming else? What else is coming up later this episode? The story of the famine and Skibbereen and what happened to some of the survivors. We found a nice little, about a 9-minute video on that, and it's free and it's on YouTube. I'll tell you the details in a minute. Now, if we take a look at that free master index search of Irish names at IrishRoots.com, we find the name listed about 12 times under that exact spelling, so that's not a lot of times compared to most of the names we hit here. We found McKelvey with an IE on the end of the name in the Scottish Macs, and we also found under different spellings in Families of County Donegal, and in the Journal of the American Irish Historical Society in Volume 27, we found William and John McKelvey noted, and we also found the name in the County Derry genealogy book and in the Birth Index of Ireland, in the Families of County Donegal, and in Irish Names and Surnames by the Reverend Patrick Wolfe. Well, that wraps up McKelvey for the day. I hope something will help you here. Now we're going to take a look next at our websites of the week. Well, number one website of the week, New York's top 10 historical sites, including Tammany Hall. A lot of politics were taken on there, and St. Patrick's Cathedral, and the 5 Points. Very famous spots. Hey, if you watch the movies, you're going to see all three of those in some of those movies, and that's listed on irishcentral.com. I've got a link to them on the blog. Number two, surprising facts about Ireland. Did you know that it once rained 40 days straight? And it's now illegal to be drunk in Ireland, and an Irish man founded the Argentinian Navy, and only 2 members of U2 are Irish-born. A lot of strange little nuances there. Got the link on the blog. Number 3, Irish convicts to New South Wales. Hey, there's a hat tip to Gould Genealogy on Twitter, pointed that out to us. Links on the blog. That's for the years 1788 to 1837. Number 4, the Skibbereen disaster. Boy, that's an Irish famine commemoration, and you've got some nice commentary on this YouTube video right there at the spot of the really commemoration center, I guess you'd say. And that town went from 6,500 people to less than half of that. Some died, some left in the coffin ships to America, Canada, Australia, and England. Some left in prison ships, they say. Some still only spoke the Irish language. And all of the records for us genealogists, boy, the birth, death, and marriage records, they say, were kept in the local workhouse. And they were burnt during a period of the Troubles back then, when they thought they were doing something patriotic by burning that place down. But we lost our roots because of that, some of us. But, you know, they talked about how it was back then. And, of course, there were no coffins for most of these people. And he said many people were just buried where you died, buried where you laid. Some were buried with only sawdust over the top of them. Now, one young boy who survived, he was actually buried. They thought he was dead. They put sawdust on top of him, and then a spade cut into his leg, and it woke him up. And they saved him and shook the dust off him and saved him. And he was alive into the very beginning years of the 20th century because he was just a boy at the time. But, you know, it was such a painful time, very few people spoke of it. And if you can just imagine a time when all of your friends and all of your families were dying wholesale and you didn't have enough to eat, or life would have just been misery. It wouldn't have been a thing you wanted to recall. So I sure understand it. And now people are just now, you know, several places in Ireland coming to understand it. And part of that understanding's after talking to some Americans and how they're real interested in it. That helps the helps uncover the record too when you see other people are looking, and it reminds you. So that's just a sample of some of this reawakening in Ireland of the misery that was suffered in the famine. Well, hey, we've done real good today. Now it's time to move on to Curious News and Notes. Number one, it seems like certain words are dying out in the north of Ireland, and even phrases like wetting the tea are dying out. I don't know, if somebody said, would you want to wet the tea? I wouldn't know what they were saying, would you? Shipyard terms and words from the linen industry that once were very popular, they've fallen into disuse. And the dictionary people over there, Collins Dictionaries, they've carried out a survey to explore which words are still in use. So there's a lot to learn from that kind of history as well. Number two, Ballykindler in County Down, Northern Ireland, is a home base for many returning soldiers from the war in Afghanistan. And one group on a 6-month tour of duty saw the loss of 13 lives and 80 injured. About 500 or so were recently awarded medal there. So I tell you, the war is a worldwide thing. There's people fighting and dying every day. Number three, it seems that Cork City has been named one of the top 10 tourist cities in the world by the Lonely Planet people. And it seems like they said that the food and the sophistication and the youthful buzz was what made it the only Irish city to make the list. Now, isn't that something? Cork City becomes one of the top 10 tourist cities, and we were just talking about Skibbereen in County Cork, which suffered so much misery 150, 160 years ago. That's amazing. How it strikes me every time I look at anything in the news. You take what happened in the 1800s to what's happening now. Number four, Port Marnock has won a Supreme Court case. They have kept the right to have a men's-only golf club, and that was by a vote of 3-2 on the Supreme Court. Now, I wonder if the Supreme Court is made up of 3 men and 2 women. That's something for another day, too. Got that out of the Irish Times. The links to all these stories are on my blog. Number 5, Ireland's first PhD in food history has been awarded to the professional chef Martin D. Con McNamara. Now, he spelled it Mac Con O'Mara. That's my best pronunciation of it, sitting here just trying to look at it, but I believe that's what they might say was McNamara. I think that's it. But he won that honor with a thesis on the history of Dublin restaurants. Now, that Dublin would have been different from the rest of the country, I'd think, for sure, being a metropolitan area so much sooner than anywhere else almost. So that would be interesting to see what foods were brought in and for who and how it differed from the people in the country. Number 6, 70,000 people recently took to the streets in Dublin. They were protesting that the wealthy should pay their fair share to avoid all the budget cuts that have been made of late by the government. Whoever's got money left is who you want to take it from. Where else you going to get it? Well, the only other answer is stop spending it. But the protests were organized by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, and the events were also held in Cork, Galway, Limerick, Waterford, Sligo, Tullamore, and Dundalk. They need to find an answer to the problem just like we do. Hey, that brings it up for the day. Remember to send your comments by clicking the contact link on our webpage at www.irishroots.com or send by mail to our American address, the Irish Roots Cafe, Box 7575, Kansas City, Missouri 64116. And don't forget the Head School. We're here working for you every day. Leave your message or report on things in your part of the world when you call my phone recorder at 816-256-3360. Skype me at Irish Roots Cafe. I'm on MySpace, Facebook, Twitter. Usually it's under Irish Roots Cafe. And members foot the bill, so they get first priority. But we're open to all. And by the way, a big thank you to all of our members. And away.